In 1983, physicist Lorne Whitehead did a research project on dominoes and wanted to see what the effect of a single domino as you pushed it would be. His research indicated that 1.5 times its size, so 1.5 times size larger, could create a chain reaction that grows exponentially, meaning more and more and more until it gets out of control completely. And so by the 26th domino, his research showed that theoretically you could knock down the tallest building that was in the world at that point with a set of dominoes that got larger and larger and larger. And the interesting thing about that research, as I was reading through it, is that we don't think about the little things being able to impact the big things. And yet, in the scriptures, it talks about how a ship is huge and yet is controlled by a small rudder. And if we think about it, so many things in our world operate that way. They look large and massive, but yet there's something smaller going on. And if you think about the difference between like the size of the dominoes leading up to a skyscraper, we'd be like, no, there's no way that can happen. And of course, it would have to be not, into the ground. I mean, as an architect would tell you that you can't be anchored. It'd have to be just a freestanding building. But the size of that and the massive size of that could start with something as small as one domino, and then as they get larger, would be able to knock over something like that. That is wild for our minds to wrap around. And so many times in our life, it is the end result that we see that we marvel about, that big bang, that big thing that happens, whether someone kind of strikes out and they become a celebrity because of how good they are at a sport or how well they sing or how smart they are, or a spelling bee contestant or a great entrepreneur, or someone builds a product that, changes everything for us. And we see that big end result, but we don't think about all the tiny little baby steps that it took to get there. For the life of faith, for those people that follow Jesus, so many times we look at people that are heroes of the faith and we say, well, I could never be like whatever person you want to elevate to that point. When the reality is that we all have the opportunity to trust Jesus, and we all have the opportunity to take small baby steps today to lead us to greater opportunities of spiritual growth tomorrow. And that's what we're going to focus on in this series as we talk about the gradual steps that often lead to sudden types of results at the end. Now, if we think about this idea of gradually then suddenly, we see that God works in our lives often with this faith idea. And faith is a difficult word for us so many times because we think, faith means like I jump out of an airplane without, any kind of parachute, and that's faith. Like blind faith is kind of what we think about. And faith, that's kind of a misuse of the word faith. The thing that we're talking about in the New Testament when we talk about faith is not just you blindly trusting with no reason to believe that something's going to happen in that way. The faith that it's talking about, as far as like even going back into the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, is this idea of trust. What do I put my trust in? And trusting God is that kind of consistent idea over time that we're told we can put our trust in Him. And that a single small step of faith can lead us to a larger step of faith. For instance, if we trust God for the small things, it's easier when we face that crisis. It's easier when we face that financial difficulty. It's easier when we face a relationship issue. It's easier when a bad diagnosis comes back to trust God in those hard situations if we have spent some time slowly, gradually building up an understanding that we can trust God in the small things and in the large things. And this is how God works in our life. He gives us smaller steps like a prayer or time alone with Him or time reading the Bible or an apology or forgiveness. And those small steps can create a spiritual chain, an effect not unlike the domino effect that goes from very small things, what we think of, a solitary prayer. That's not a big deal. You can pray right now. You can pray with your eyes open. You can pray while someone else is talking. You can pray while you're driving. You can pray at any point. That's not a huge deal. And yet, the compound nature of those small actions can help us when we get to those big, terrible moments in life, those crisis moments in life, or those crisis moments where we don't know what kind of decision to make. And that can impact not only us, but as we see in the scriptures, that can impact generations. those small decisions a day that we don't think they're mundane, we don't think there's anything to it, actually echo throughout our life and through the lives of those that come after us. But, unfortunately, with our limited sight lines, it's so difficult to see that sometimes. It's difficult to put together more than, I don't know about you, but sometimes I look at my monthly calendar and I get a little overwhelmed, and so I'll tell Google, okay, I just want to see this week, and it'll be like, no, I don't really like that either, show me one day. And I'm like, oh, goodness, okay, I'll take that. And then sometimes when I get to the day view, and it's got too many things, I'll be like, well, let's look at a different day where there's not so much. I just got to get to one that's like there's some openings. Where's some margin at? And then I like, next Tuesday. Next Tuesday looks good. And then something, of course, will pop up eventually. But that's kind of the way it is. Our limited sight is difficult sometimes to see the bigger picture. We are very much here on the earth. We are very much here looking straight ahead. Time is very linear to us. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we just see things like that. We see the days pass, the weeks pass, the months pass. So it's difficult to have God's perspective kind of out of time and broader and much larger. Because we know, every one of us knows in this room, I don't think I'm telling you anything that you don't know already, we have a very finite amount of time left here. Each one of us has a finite amount of time. Some of us have years, some of us have months, some of us have many decades. We don't know that, but we all know that it's not forever and that it is quite small in the grand sweep of history. And so as we think about how hard it is to see this, what we're going to attempt to do in this series is to try to get from God's perspective onto our lives and to accept and to trust that he knows better than we do because he has much more data available to him than we do. Now, I want you to let that soak in for a minute. If God is outside of time, and God is not on the earth with us in this moment only, but he's in all moments at all times, this is the idea that is one of those characteristics. When we talk about the academics, when they write about this stuff, they talk about some of the characteristics of God that are not able to transfer to us, right? So these are immutable characteristics of God. We cannot take on these characteristics. And one of those is omnipresence, outside of this moment. He's in all moments at all times. Omniscience, right? And this knowledge of everything at once too. So he knows everything. He's in every time. He's in every place. There's nothing. We can't do that. So that's very difficult for us to wrap our heads around. We are in this moment, in this time, and we are moment by moment fading away. We realize that, right? And so we're like a mist of vapor. We're here for a moment and then we're gone. But God is not like that. He's eternal. And so he sees all of that. And so knowing all of that and having all of that in the Creator, that means we listen to him, we put our trust in him. It's a wise investment to do that. It makes sense. It doesn't make sense to trust my best buddy who also is only in this time and only has his life experiences and only knows history from his birth forward, right? It doesn't make any sense to trust people, the guru on television selling you the book or the course or the how-to guide. It doesn't make any sense to trust them more than God because they are very finite, limited beings. Now, they might be a little bit smarter than me, right? Maybe they have studied something and learned more about it in their time than I have. But that doesn't mean that their perspective is a lot broader than mine. So when I talk about my trust, I can put my trust in people, or I can put my trust in God. I can put my trust in myself, in systems that humans have created, or I can put my trust in the divine Creator. And that's the difference in what we'll talk about in this series. I love this thought from Zechariah in the Old Testament. It says, "Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin." God celebrates the beginnings of small things. And so small is okay. And as I think about that, some of you are going to be familiar with this concept and some of you are not. But Watkins is a company that existed for a long time. I think they actually still exist, but not in the same way they do. Watkins was a company that originated in the early Americas as kind of these snake oil salesmen that drove these cars around and sold garbage out of the back of their cars. And I thought it would be a smart idea in the 1990s to sign on to be a Watkins man, which by that point had evolved into a multi-level marketing pyramid scheme. And so I thought it would be awesome to sell this stuff because I read a book about it and it sounded really cool. And so I worked for this company for a little bit. I was an independent distributor of like this cinnamon toothpaste stuff. I don't know. It was awful. But anyway, and all of a sudden, I had signed up and like paid my entry fee to this because I was going to be a multimillionaire from selling this. This was me as a 20-year-old thinking this was smart. And wouldn't you know it, I didn't sell anything and lost all my investment in that. But wouldn't you know it, also, they started going to retail outlets and selling out from underneath us. And so all of a sudden, the products that I bought were worthless because they were on discount store shelves all over the place. And so I had a stock of this stuff. And Wendy could tell you stories about how long that cinnamon toothpaste lasted. A long time. And the sad thing is, this is not the only entrepreneurial failure in my life. I have several stories that I could talk about, ridiculous ideas. I was a dreamer, still am, and so lots of silly things. I had a few successes, but I also had some just glorious failures that were awesome. And as you think about that, a lot of the time I would get really excited. That's kind of my nature. Really excited at the beginning of the idea. And then when I saw how much work it was going to be, I kind of got a little less excited about the idea. And then those small little baby steps that could have led to something suddenly happening, that gradual process. And you can probably relate, right? I mean, I think one of the biggest times of the year where this happens is New Year's. We make these big resolutions. I mean, have you seen the gyms around town? Goodness, the parking lots are overflowing. I could hardly get to KFC the other day. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, just crazy. And then by the time we get to mid-February, there will be 2 cars there, right? That's just the way these things work. And the gyms know this. That's why they want to sign you up for an annual contract, because they know you're going to have a lot of energy at first. And the problem is we have difficulty with perseverance. And that's kind of the key word, I would say. If there's one word undergird in the next 4 weeks that we spend together talking about this, it's perseverance or patience maybe. But those two things kind of go hand in hand. Perseverance in continuing to do the small, gradual steps that lead to big results, and patience with God in those moments where we want to see results. We want immediacy. I mean, I know one time I went to the gym and I was like, hoo, hoo, hoo. And then I was like looking in the mirror and I'm like, well, this is worthless, and so I'm not going back to that. I didn't instantly Arnold, I was an Arnold Schwarzenegger instantly, and so John Cena, youngsters. Anyway, I wasn't instantly like buff, and I was like, well, this is ridiculous. What am I going to spend weeks in here? Because I wasn't going to do that. And, that's kind of how we think sometimes. And maybe you can think of an example in your own life where, you made a decision, you thought you were going to commit to this thing, and then all of a sudden, you're like, no, I'm not going to stick with it for the long time. Sometimes we make financial choices that are poor. Sometimes we make relationship choices that are poor. Sometimes we make health decisions that are not wise. And we do a lot of that because we don't see immediate results, and we want immediate results. We love the microwave. We can't stand the crock pot approach. And so because we don't see that, we give up very soon. That's why I love what Paul writes to the Galatian church. He says, let's not get tired. Let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing if we don't give up. Now, a couple things jumped off this to me when I read this scripture. First of all, obviously he's writing, Paul writes a lot of the time to address what's going on in these churches. So obviously the Christians here in this church are starting to burn out. And he's saying, let's not get tired. Let's not do that. Let's not stop doing what is good. Don't give up. You're giving up too soon. Because if you don't give up, then at just the right time, we will reap a harvest of blessing. The inverse is also true. If you give up too soon, you're going to miss out on that great thing that God has for you. If you stop trusting him too soon, you're going to take and accept whatever is handed to you. You're going to accept what someone else, some guru tells you is the truth. Some ideology gives you. Some cult sells you a false truth. And you're going to take that and you're going to miss the blessing that God has in store for you. And that is so gut-wrenching and so harmful and hurtful. And we don't want that for anyone. And we don't want that for one another. And so what we have to do is regularly encourage one another in this way, to not give up, to be people that persevere, to not get tired. While we love stories of success, we love stories of, oh, wow, that's so successful, what we tend to not put as much emphasis in is the stories of how that process works. Because, what was the research a few years ago? To get really good at something, to become like kind of just a step above amateur, like pro-am level kind of stuff, 10,000 hours of work at that. And then if you want to be really professional and proficient, more time on top of that. Can you think about what you've given 10,000 hours to? Whew. We got some Netflix specialists in the room, right? I'm right there with you. Got a new show. Anyway. That's kind of, and especially when you're snowed in and stuff, and you're like, I'm bored, I don't know what to do. And you're like, well, I can go eat another box of Oreos, or I could watch, binge 6 hours of television. I saw somebody funny say something the other day. They were like, if somebody asked you, hey, you want to go to the movies and you want to watch a 10-hour movie at the movie theater? And you're like, no, that's crazy. I'm like, well, what if I split it up over 10 episodes and you could watch it at home with a box of Oreos? And I'm like, oh, yeah, sign me up for that. I'll do that, absolutely. Like, that's kind of where we are with our time. And so we don't think about this time exchange. But if you think about what it takes to get good at something, and if it takes that kind of investment, we often lack the perseverance to stick with things like that. We often only see the end results of what someone really spent time on, invested blood, sweat, and tears. The perseverance, the hard work, the patience of waiting on God to bring the end results. And for us, as you hear those words even, probably a time frame is coming to your mind. You're like, patience with God and perseverance. So he's talking what? A couple weeks? Some of you, a little more advanced, you're like, a couple months. Those of you at the top level are like, a year. Who amongst us is like, I'll wait a lifetime for some of these things? Who would say, I may not even see it, but maybe my future generations after me will see it? That's like mind-blowing kind of patience. And that's the kind of patience that we read about in the scriptures. And it's so beyond my capability to do that. I can't just be patient enough in my own strength to want that to happen. And I know that you likely cannot do that either. It's something that happens much outside of our own abilities to do that. And so how do we move to that level of patience? It only comes by trusting in God. I love what Stevenson wrote. He said, don't judge each day by the harvest you reap, but by the seeds that you plant. What would it look like in your life if you started to take on that philosophy right now, that you didn't think everything has to be done by 5 o'clock, by sundown? Everything has to be done, and I'm going to judge this day as a success or failure based on what I got done in this day, or this week, or this month, or this year. But you took a longer trajectory. I remember reading about the Rockefellers who have generational wealth in our country. Starting back at the very beginning of our country, they were some of the people that had those businesses and things, and that's why their name is on so many buildings, and Rockefeller Center in New York City, and why they have such deep roots in economics, is because they took an investment timeline. Like, they would not invest, this was written down, that they would not make investments that were under 100 years in scope. Like, if it was going to be something that wouldn't last, they did not want to invest in it. 100 years? Who amongst us thinks like that? Hardly anyone, right? And that's kind of the thought process that it takes here, is that you have to think outside of the immediate results, and you have to start thinking about longer term results. And so what we may be doing now is not something that is going to be a sudden success, an overnight success, just, where we can celebrate that immediately. But what we look at is that what we're doing is important now. Sometimes that's planting seeds for a harvest of blessing that may come later, if, as the scriptures say, we don't give up doing good. I think one of the most curious of God's creations is the caterpillar, that kind of ekes along and leaves that little snot line as they're moving, and then all of a sudden it wraps itself up, and then poof, a beautiful butterfly comes out of that. I think it's one of the most curious transformations that happens in the kingdom. It's so interesting to me, and how different it is than almost anything else we see. It begins as this little ugly thing, and then all of a sudden it takes to the wind, and it's flying, and it's in the sky. And so this is something that I think we could kind of learn from this example a little bit in nature of, that we measure progress by results so many times. Like, how much did I get done today? What is this moving the ball forward down the field kind of idea. And God measures progress a little differently. God measures progress in how we grow spiritually towards him, of trusting him more. Not did you make the most, or did you accumulate the most, or did you look the most successful, but what is your faithfulness level? And as I mentioned earlier, that faithfulness word, how much are you trusting him? Or how much are you saying, God, I trust you, but then you're still behind the scenes kind of trying to figure everything out on your own? That's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, right? He's got this big projection of this wizard and all the smoke and all that stuff, but behind it's this little man running the machine. And sometimes that's kind of the way we are with God, is like, yeah, I trust you, God, but I'm going to try to figure everything out on my own, and I'm going to work behind the scenes, and I'm still going to be basically in charge of everything. And that's not really trusting God with the results. That's trusting yourself and giving lip service to trusting God with those results. My thought is today, at least, I wanted to kind of get this thought across to us as we open this series, is that even when we don't see immediate results, we can trust that God is working. He is at work. Even though we can't see immediate results, we may not see that instant success, we may not see what's happening right in front of us. Faith, by definition, is this trust in God that he is at work. He was at work before I existed. He was at work before I came to know Christ and started to follow Christ. He is at work right now in the moment, and he will continue to be at work because he, again, is outside of time. And so my trust can be in him because he is the one that is at work. To follow Christ means that I put my trust in him. Trust in what way? Trust, first of all, that Jesus is who he says he is, that he is the Son of God, and that he went to the cross for me, died, was buried, and lived again in resurrection. This is the essence of the gospel. The good news for us is that Jesus went to the cross for us, and that we have a hope of living again because of his life, death, and resurrection. That is the crux of all Christianity. We talk more and more about this as we get into the season of Lent and to Easter season, because it is the whole focus of everything. While Christmas is fun, Christmas is not the point, right? The birth alone of Jesus is not the point of Christianity. The point of the church, and why we've existed for over 2,000 years now, is because of the central message of the uniqueness of Jesus. His death, his burial, and his resurrection. And lots of people die and are buried, so the real key there is the resurrection of Jesus. And so to follow Jesus means I trust that Jesus is who he says he is, that I trust that he did go to the cross for me, that he's not a liar, that he's not insane, but instead I trust that what he said and what the early Christians saw happen and wrote down is true. And then the second part of that is perseverance, after I have trusted Christ, is being patient in the waiting with what God is doing. Trust is the central key word here, though. People put their trust in all kinds of things. And so it's not a question of what, will you trust? We all trust something. It's what will you trust? What is the story you want to be a part of? You get to pick that. That's the greatest thing that God has given us here outside of Jesus himself. It's this idea that we are made in his image and we have choice. He doesn't force us to love him. God doesn't force you to come to church today. God doesn't force you to think about these things. He gives you an opportunity, an invitation. The door is always open for you. You're always welcome. You're always a part of the family if you want to be, but you can self-exclude yourself outside of that if you choose to do so, because anything opposite of that would be him forcing you to love him or forcing you not to love him, and that wouldn't make sense because the whole definition of love is this choice idea. So trust means that I trust God is working. I trust that I am not alone in my waiting, and I trust that God cares for me. When we talk about the vision of our church being that we want every man, woman, and child to know that God is for them, there is a lot of messaging out there that God is against you. And so we want everybody to understand that that's not actually what the scriptures say, that the scriptures tell us that Jesus was sent for us as a gift for us. But it's not just like in one place it says that. It's over and over and over. In fact, in the Gospel of Matthew, it says, why would you worry about your clothing? So not even your life and death, but why would you even worry about what you're wearing? He says, look at the lilies of the field and how they grow. They don't work or make clothing. Yet Solomon in all his glory, which is one of the kings in the Old Testament who was the most wealthy person ever. In all of his glory, he was never dressed as beautifully as the lilies of the field are. He continues, if God cares so wonderfully for wildflowers that are here today and thrown in the fire tomorrow, he will certainly care for you. Jesus asks, why do you have so little faith? Again, I think we've messed up when we've made that word faith mean less. Jesus is getting at here, why do you have so little trust? God cares about the flowers. He certainly cares about you. You're worth so much more than flowers to him. God cares about you. Why don't you trust him that he cares about you? Why don't you trust that he's going to meet your needs? Why don't you trust that he is sending, in fact, Jesus himself here teaching, why don't you trust that he sent me to be your salvation, your rescue? And this really hit them. And I think to us, it also opens up some big questions. Because this world, it's so easy to get discouraged. If you are on any social media, ouch. I mean, our world feels dark and our world feels heavy. And it doesn't feel like it's getting any better. And that's the reality, is that we live in a fallen world, a dark world. A world of pain and suffering and evil, and we can't wrap our heads around the actions of others. And then, as Paul teaches, you go to the mirror and you look at yourself, and sometimes you can't even recognize who that is, and you're like, why do I do what I don't want to do? It is a wretched place to live in, and yet at the same time, there are bursts of hope that come through, and Jesus is trying to share with us that, yes, the moment may be rough, and yes, you may not be excited about the situation you're in right now or what's going on in your personal life or in the broader area around you or the world. But you know what? At the end of the day, God cares about you. You get to choose who you put your trust in. Jesus never excludes you. You choose if you want to be excluded. You can exclude yourself, but Jesus welcomes you, kicked open the door wide for you, created a way for all of us to be directly with the Father. So, if you have even the smallest interest, even this much, be assured God is going to go over and beyond to you because he is searching for you. He is running towards you. He is not like sitting up in heaven like, well, let's see the list of who's called on me today. No, God is searching for you. He's looking on the horizon for you. It's why Jesus tells in the story of the prodigal son that the father was looking on the horizon, waiting for his son to come back. Man, the second he gets wind of the son running back, he runs to him and grabs him and hugs him. This is how God thinks of you. Have you said you're angry with God before? Have you cussed at God before? Have you yelled at God before? Have you screamed at the sky before? None of that is relevant. God wipes it all away because of his overwhelming love. And you're like, well, that means God loves me a whole lot more than I love him. And it's like, absolutely. That's the way this works. You'll never love him perfectly. You'll never love him with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. That is our goal, and we're pushing for it, and we want to try for it. We want to encourage one another to do that. But we are so wretched that it's so difficult to get outside of the constraints of time and space, the constraints of this physical vessel, the constraints of the world and the culture that we live in. And yet we have broad, big goals to do that. We want to love like Jesus. We want to look at the world around us and people that we don't understand and people that have animus towards us and hate towards us, and we want to do everything we can to love them with everything God's blessed us with, even if they don't like us at all. This is what Jesus taught us to do. Jesus loved the people who were mistreating him and beating him and crucified him, and he said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. If you have the smallest interest, God definitely will meet you. Jesus has kicked open those gates and is holding mercy's gate wide open for you today. And all you need to do is say yes to Jesus. And that for you might be the first, smallest, gradual step, baby step that you take. And you're like, well, that sounds rather easy. And it absolutely is. It's not a big deal on your behalf. It's a huge deal on God's behalf. The fact that salvation is free sometimes confuses us, but it's like winning the lottery. Someone paid for it. You didn't pay for it, right? You're not paying the $1 billion, but someone paid for that. In this case, Jesus went to the cross and died for you. He paid with his own life, his own blood. That's why we talk about the blood of Jesus. If you've ever been confused why there's so much blood talk in church about the blood of Jesus, it's because he paid in his own blood on his death on the cross for us. For what we were guilty of, he went innocent in our place for. That's good news for you and me, though, because it means it's a very small step for us. A very small step of just saying, yes, I want to follow you. Thank you for this mercy. Thank you for this grace, Jesus. I say, yes, thank you. And in that moment, he certainly wraps you in his arms. The text records in the scriptures that the angels celebrate in heaven when someone comes to that realization in their life. And so my question for you is, will you take the first baby step? Many of you have. Some of you have, but you're kind of like swirling around here in this moment, realizing the depth of what has happened, and you have become convicted, and you need to say, yeah, I need to one-up that. I need to renew that. I need to come back to my first love. Some of you, for the first time, are saying, you know what? Yeah, I get it now. I've not taken that first step. That was a huge thing God did for me, but I haven't taken the smallest step towards him, and I can do that right now. So I want to pray for you in this moment that you will say yes to the baby step of trusting Jesus. Whether it's the first time you're saying that or the 1,000th time, I think it's valid for us to all affirm that. And so I want to invite you. You don't have to, and it is your choice. It has to be your choice. God will never force you to do that. But I want you, if you've come to a point where you're ready, I want to invite you to pray that with me right now. So would you pray with me? God, we thank you so much in learning about these different ideas from the Old Testament and the New Testament, of learning through the gospel account of what you've done for us, that we can right now be assured that you have opened the gate wide for every single person. And all we need to do is say yes. The first step is to say yes to your grace. Yes to you, Jesus. I pray today that across this room we will trust you. That we will voice our trust right now and say, Jesus, I trust you. I trust you are who you say you are. That you did what the Gospels record on my behalf. And from this moment forward, I want to follow your pattern, your lead, as I trust you through what I don't understand every day and every moment. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Now, the good thing is, God doesn't leave us there, right? He doesn't just say, okay, so you trust me and you follow me. That is not the end of our relationship with Jesus. It is the beginning. There are more steps we take every day. I've mentioned some of them today. Reading our Bible, prayer. But there are other ways to understand what the scriptures tell us, and we look at the scriptures, for example. We look at how Jesus treated people, for instance, and we see how we should treat others. And we see that Jesus loved people well in ways that is difficult sometimes to actually get going in our life. But we hold him as the example, and we say, I want to be more like Jesus. And so in order to do that, I have to take steps. I have to try it on, if you will. And so one of the ways that we try things on are what we call the practices of faith. And so this week, I want to encourage you to start small. And I think that's what we've learned through the teachings today, is that sometimes things take very small steps and add up and echo through larger things in our life. So what would it look like not to be, overly zealous, right? We're not signing up for a gym membership and saying, I'm going to be He-Man in 2 minutes. We're saying, no. How do I start small and develop the right things so that I can continue to be a part of that gradual process that God is leading me on in my spiritual journey? Not fixing everything at once. You're not perfect instantly, right? But we seek to follow a perfect example who is Jesus. So if we're trying to be more like him, we do have to modify and look at what in our life we don't want to be the same. What if we were to, first of all, in this series, talk about the practice of learning to trust God? And here's the thing. While we say, I trust you, right, in a prayer in that moment, that's not really the fullness of it, is it? Like, we can say it and mean it, and that's great, but Monday morning comes, do I really practice that? Do I really trust him, or did I just say it? And that's where sometimes, unfortunately, things get mixed up in our life, right? What is going to happen when the bad moment hits? What is going to happen when the valley comes? How can I learn to, in the good moments or the kind of neutral moments, start to learn to trust Jesus? And I think there's a lot of different ideas here. But for me, one of the most powerful things that I've ever done in my life is to practice the one another's. The one another's are like when the scriptures tell us to love one another, right? Or to honor one another, to welcome one another, to show hospitality to one another, to agree with those that maybe we even disagree with, to be at peace as much as is possible, to be kind to one another, to forgive one another. Inside our app, if you'll click the Today button, I went through and put together as many as I could find in these different sources of the one another's and the scriptures that go with them. So you can pick a couple to try on this week. And there's just tons of them. I mean, there's like 2 pages of one another's, way that we can treat others. And when we do a Jesus-centered habit like that, what it teaches us to do is to treat people differently. And it in turn starts to change and mold and shape us to be more like Christ. And that's what we want to be. We want to shape ourselves more in his pattern, more to be like he is in this world. And so this is something I'm going to invite you to do, to practice daily this week. Just in a small, if you just think about it, how could I honor someone if that's the one you picked? How could I welcome someone, right? How could I be at peace with people? These are all Jesus-centered practices. How can I start to take on 1 or 2 of these and not give up doing good, but trust that God is working through that process, even though I may not see immediate results? I may, what if I picked, I want to be at peace with someone, and then somebody really rubs me wrong, right? Cuts me off in traffic, and I'm, well, I need to try again, right? I have failed in that moment. And failure is part of this process. Failure is part of perseverance. Failure is part of learning to trust God. We don't get it right. We fail, but we don't give up doing good. That's what the scriptures say. And that's what I'm going to hope for you this week, that you will not give up, that you will trust the timing to God. You will trust the growth to God. You will plant the seeds. You will every day look for little ways to live out one of these one another's, and in doing so, trust the results to God, so that you and your people and this church and this community can be a place where people say, yeah, Coffee Creek is a group of people who refuse to give up. Even when progress is slow, they don't give up. They don't despise small beginnings, but like the caterpillar, they are waiting to see God's breakthrough in their life, even if the rest of us can't see it right now. That's my hope for you.